This is the story of a girl, a simple girl born in a small village, who would go on to change the course of history forever. Her name was Joan of Arc. Joan was born around the year 1412, in a quiet village called Documentry, in the northeast of France. She came from a poor farming family. Her life was simple. She helped her parents in the fields, took care of animals, and spent much of her time in prayer. At the time, France was in chaos. The country was in the middle of a long and brutal conflict with England, a war we now know as the 100 Years' War. Villages were being destroyed. People were living in fear, and the future of France looked uncertain. But Joan was different. From a very young age, she was deeply religious. She believed strongly in God and spent hours praying. Then, something extraordinary happened. At around the age of 13, Joan began to experience visions. She claimed that she could hear voices that were not of this world. According to Joan, these voices belonged to saints, Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret. They gave her a mission that seemed impossible. They told her to help save France, and to ensure that Charles, the rightful heir, would become king. Imagine that for a moment. A teenage girl, with no education in warfare, no experience in leadership, being told that she must lead a nation to victory. Most people would have ignored such voices. Most would have been afraid. But Joan was not. She believed. As the years passed, the voices became clearer, stronger, and more urgent. And so did Joan's determination. By the age of 16, she had made her decision. She would leave her home. She would find Charles. And she would fulfill the mission she believed God had given her. People laughed at her. They doubted her. They said, "She is just a peasant girl. What can she possibly do?" But Joan did not listen. There was something burning inside her. Faith, courage, and an unshakable sense of purpose. And that was only the beginning. Music slowly fades. We saw how a simple village girl, Joan, began hearing mysterious voices. Voices that gave her a mission to save France. Music builds slightly. Now the journey truly begins. At just 16 years old, Joan left her home. She traveled across dangerous lands, determined to meet Charles, the man she believed was the true heir to the French throne. After a long and difficult journey, Joan finally arrived at the royal court. But there was a problem. Charles did not trust her. After all, why would a king believe a teenage peasant girl claiming to hear divine voices? To test her, Charles disguised himself among his court. He hid his identity, hoping to trick her. But Joan walked straight through the crowd, and without hesitation she recognized him. She went directly to him, and addressed him as the true king. This moment shocked everyone. From that point on, Charles began to take her seriously. Still, he was cautious. Joan was examined by church officials. They questioned her, tested her faith, and searched for any sign of deception. But she stood firm, confident, calm, unshaken. In the end, she was given a chance. Joan was allowed to join the French army. Music rises, powerful tone. But she did not dress like other girls. She wore armor. She carried a banner. And she rode into battle not with fear but with faith. Her first mission? To save the city of Orleans. At the time, Orleans was under siege by English forces. If the city fell, France could lose everything. The situation was desperate. The army was losing hope. But Joan arrived, and everything changed. She inspired the soldiers. She spoke with confidence. She told them that victory was near. And somehow they believed her. Within days, the French army, led by Joan, launched a series of attacks. The fighting was intense. Arrows filled the sky. Cannons roared. Men fell on both sides. During one battle, Joan herself was struck by an arrow. She was wounded. For a moment, it seemed like everything might fall apart. But Joan did not give up. She returned to the battlefield, holding her banner high, and leading her troops forward once again. And then the impossible happened. The siege of Orleans was broken. The English forces retreated. France had its first major victory in years. Joan of Arc, a teenage girl, had turned the tide of the war. Music slows, emotional tone. After this victory, Joan became a symbol of hope. People began to believe again. And Charles? He was ready for the next step. to be crowned King of France. But the journey was far from over. His success would soon bring even greater danger. Joan of Arc was no longer just a village girl. She was now a national hero, a symbol of hope, a figure people believed in. After the success at Orleans, Joan continued her mission. She guided Charles through enemy territory, clearing the path step by step, city by city, until finally they reached Reims. This was the place where French kings were crowned, and in a powerful and unforgettable moment, Charles was crowned as King Charles VII. Joan stood beside him, watching as the mission she believed in became reality. For a brief moment, it felt like everything had been achieved. But history is never that simple. Music tone shifts darker. Despite her success, not everyone supported Joan. Some leaders were jealous. Others were suspicious of her visions. And enemies were watching closely. In 1430, during a battle near the town of Compiègne, Joan was captured. She was taken prisoner by forces allied with the English. And instead of being treated as a soldier, she was treated as a criminal. She was sold to the English. What followed was not a fair trial. It was a political trial. Joan was accused of heresy, of claiming to hear voices, of dressing like a man, of going against the church. She was only 19 years old. 19. And yet, she stood in front of powerful judges, alone, without protection, without support. But she did not break. They questioned her for hours, weeks, trying to trap her, trying to force her into confession. But Joan remained strong. Her answers were calm, intelligent, and fearless. Even her enemies were surprised. For a moment, it seemed like truth might win. But the decision had already been made. Joan was found guilty. Music becomes heavy and slow. On May 30th, 1431, in the city of Rouen, Joan of Arc was taken to the marketplace. A large crowd gathered. Some watched in silence, others in sorrow. She was tied to a stake, and in her final moments, she asked for a cross. She prayed, and she called out to God until the very end. Then the fire was lit, and just like that, the girl who changed history was gone. Music softens, emotional. But this was not the end of her story. Years later, people began to question what had happened. Was she truly guilty, or had she been betrayed? In 1456, a retrial was held. This time the truth came out. Joan was declared innocent. Her name was cleared. And over time, she became more than just a historical figure. She became a legend, a symbol of courage, of faith, of standing strong, even when the world is against you. Today, Joan of Arc is remembered as a hero of France, a saint, and one of the bravest young women in history. Music fades slowly. Her story reminds us that even the most ordinary person can achieve the most extraordinary things if they have the courage to believe.